Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I'd like to turn the call over to your host, Ms. Earlene Dow. Earlene, you may begin.
Thank you, Greg, for hosting our webinar. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the June Local Employment Dynamics, or LED, webinar. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the LED Partnership, in collaboration with the Council for Community and Economic Research and the Labor Market Information Institute, it is my pleasure to welcome a 2022 LED workshop presenter, Patrick Hewitt, as he presents Providing Local Communities with the Data They Need. Hewitt presents how a variety of sources, including the U.S. Census Bureau's Population Estimates, the 5-year American Community Survey, and the LEHD Origin Destination Employment Statistics, or LOADS dataset, along with the Northern Ohio Data and Information Service and the County Fiscal Office, were all used to publish the 2021 data book for Cuyahoga County. The book provides insight into the Cuyahoga County communities and was intended to be used by local governments, community organizations, and others interested in learning more about the community. It can also be used as a resource in preparing grant applications, understanding community changes, and identifying issues to address. Patrick Hewitt is a manager of planning services with the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission in charge of strategy and development. A resident of Cleveland, Ohio, he attended Denison University for his bachelor's in history and received his master's degree in city and regional planning from the Ohio State University. Patrick has more than a decade of experience in community planning in Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland, and has served as the leader planner on the multiple planning projects in Cuyahoga County, including community master plans, countywide economic development plans, regional zoning analysis, and transit-oriented development strategies. Patrick has also volunteered locally with the Cuyahoga County Monument Commission, the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, and his local Cleveland Landmarks Design Review Committee. With a passion for building vibrant places, Patrick begins experience on place-based design and community revitalization and how data can inform these efforts. With that, I welcome Patrick.
Thank you, Earlene. And welcome everyone. Again, my name is Patrick Hewitt and I am a planning manager with the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission here in Cleveland, Ohio. Today, I'm going to be talking about providing local communities with the data they need, the data book series that is produced by the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission. It is an annual series and our most recent data book was produced in 2021. For those of you that don't know Cuyahoga County or the city of Cleveland, wanted to give a brief introduction to our city and our region. These are just a couple of the major landmarks in the city of Cleveland. Many people know the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If you want to go see Elvis's outfits, you're able to go see that there on our lakefront. Other folks may know about the Cleveland Museum of Art, which is a fantastic museum that is open for free 365 days a year. And some folks may know Edgewater Park, which is a recently refurbished park along Lake Erie and hosts weekly beach concerts in the summer. If you don't know, our lakes look much like inland seas, so it is always fun to have a good beach concert on warm days. And if you do know all of those, most folks won't know our famous Karantovanja Festival, a Slovenian festival that highlights the current jump. The currents are shown here to help scare away winter. And I say that just as an introduction to Cleveland, but also because you may not know everything about Cuyahoga County or Cleveland. And one of the other things that you might not know is kind of where we're located and how Cuyahoga County is set up. This slide showcases where Cleveland and Cuyahoga County are located in the state of Ohio. We're in Northeast Ohio, in a metro area that's made up of 5 counties, the heart of which is Cuyahoga County. It is the largest, and Cleveland is the seat of government and the largest city in Cuyahoga County. But in addition to Cleveland itself, we have a total of 59 municipalities located in Cuyahoga County. Cleveland is the largest, but this map showcases in the darkest blue, the city of Cleveland. In the lighter blue are inner ring suburbs. And these are communities that were built in the early 1900s up to the 1950s that are dense, walkable places where you might not even know that you've left the city of Cleveland if you didn't know community borders in this area. So very urban places in Cuyahoga County. And then our kind of middle blue communities on the edge of Cuyahoga County are our outer ring suburbs, places that are more suburban in character and were more recently developed. And these places range greatly. We have our smallest community in Cuyahoga County is Lindale, just 169 people. And our largest community outside the city of Cleveland is the city of Parma, which has more than 78,000 people. So a wide range in terms of number of people, but also in terms of their layouts, makeup, and their abilities to undertake planning, zoning, and other municipal efforts. When we look at some of these different places, as I mentioned, they do tend to be very different. Lakewood in the top left is a walkable lakefront city, again, very urban and dense, whereas Berea is home to Baldwin Wallace University and a historic downtown, slightly more suburban than Lakewood. Shaker Heights is a community of very stately homes from many of the Gilded Age folks that lived in the city of Cleveland. And Euclid is more of a working class city that has recently reinvented itself by renovating and building upon its lakefront location with a really unique lakefront park expansion. So all of these places are unique. They have unique needs and unique abilities to plan and to undertake development efforts. And that is where we come in. So we are the Cuyahoga County, or I work for the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, which is located right in that pink box there in the Cuyahoga County Administrative Headquarters in downtown Cleveland. Despite being in that administrative headquarters building, we are actually an independent agency. We're not part of the county structure. We report to our own board of mayors and representatives of the county. Our mission is shown here. It's to inform and provide services in support of the short and long-term comprehensive planning, quality of life, environment, and economic development of Cuyahoga County and those 59 cities, villages, and townships. We generally do this through free or discounted planning assistance to communities. So of those communities within the county, we have worked with many of them on projects like master plans, park plans, corridor studies. We help update zoning codes and undertake regional initiatives, thinking about infrastructure planning and others. The most common type of plan that we do are our master plans. This is a master plan that was recently completed for the city of Broadview Heights. And our master plan processes typically go through a series of steps to get to completion. And that's what some of these images showcase here. The top left is the cover page, but in the middle is the current conditions that we undertake, where we do an assessment of the community to help understand the current state of jobs, housing, demographics, and other data points that help build a profile of each community. We then help communities undertake a vision for how they want to grow and develop in the future. What would they like their community to look like? How would people like to be able to get around? We then work towards recommendations, those lower two left images that includes maps of potential trails and other projects, and renderings and graphics of what places might look like in the future. And we wrap all that together with implementation that helps communities undertake those efforts by outlining partners, priorities, and responsibilities that can help communities understand how to get projects done. Throughout this project, we do public involvement and we collect data so that we have a complete profile and understanding of the community that we're working in. As an example, this is data that we collected for Broadview Heights that helped us understand the economics of that place as we began that process. Up in the top, we looked at things like total number of jobs within Broadview Heights, looking all the way back to 2007 and at this point through 2015 to see how the Great Recession affected job loss in Broadview Heights and how the recovery had been going since the low point in 2011. We looked at the types of jobs that were located in Broadview Heights and noticed what types of sectors were the largest for the community: trade, transportation, utilities, educational and health services, professional and business services, for instance. And we looked at things like retail vacancy, showing that Broadview Heights had a much lower retail vacancy than the county as a whole, or that the city's median household income was nearly double the county's average. With all of this information in mind, it helps us inform how we do planning. This is downtown Broadview Heights, and as we looked at things like retail vacancy, we started to understand that there were opportunities for new retail. We started to understand that there were opportunities for new housing and needs for places like parks. And as we looked at the downtown area in Broadview Heights, we started to build how this might be able to be redeveloped in the future. We looked at things like walkable development, shown in blue, green infrastructure, trees that could be built along, that could be added along roads to create a more interesting as well as a more environmentally friendly area. New roads and how they could connect existing developments, the adding of diverse housing and parks, and we base this information on the data and metrics gathered as part of that current conditions. But what we found as we worked through all these communities in Cuyahoga County was that we were repeating this current conditions data gathering efforts for each of those communities. This map shows the communities that we worked in. Different colors showcase different years or different types of projects, but it showcases just how many communities we've done things like master plans or corridor studies for. And for each one of these projects, we found that we were undertaking extensive reviews and data gathering. And we were often comparing communities to their neighboring communities so that they could understand how they fit amongst their neighbors. So we tended to download most of the data for the county, but to only showcase individual communities and how their data compared to their immediate neighbors. And we realized that there was an opportunity where we could provide data more generally on a more consistent basis that could be of use to all of our communities in Cuyahoga County. And that is where the data book came in. The data book is an annual series of documents that provide data to the communities of Cuyahoga County. Our first one was completed in 2020, and the second one was completed in 2021. We have a third underway now. It provides insights into the communities that comprise Cuyahoga County, and our purpose here was to assist communities in understanding their metrics, understanding things like demographics and housing, so that people could understand their community and how it fit into the larger larger community of municipalities within Cuyahoga County. We also wanted to provide that data in an accessible format, and we wanted it to be recent. We did not want people to have to be data scientists to be able to understand the metrics that define their community. So we wanted to provide data that comes out quickly, and we wanted to provide it in a format that people could understand easily by looking at it. And we wanted to update it regularly so the communities could have the most up-to-date data when they're applying for grants, when they're considering different initiatives that they might want to undertake. The data book itself has data available in 6 different geographies. The state of Ohio, so that people could understand the state as a whole, the 5-county Cleveland metro area, Cuyahoga County in particular, each of the individual 59 communities of Cuyahoga County, and then we also grouped this into those 2 geographies I mentioned previously, into the inner ring suburbs and into the outer ring suburbs, so people could understand how those 2 groupings collectively what their data looked like. We looked at data in 39 different metrics across 5 topic areas: demographics, housing, economy, land use, and transportation. Those five topic areas are shown here, the section pages for each of those. And we color-coded this so that we could help communities quickly, again, understand their data. We'll focus, for the most part today, on red, the economy, which is where most of the jobs data comes into play. These were the 39 different metrics that we looked at for the data book. I'm not going to go through all of these, but in general, the demographics data helped us to understand the size and composition of the population within our communities. Economy, the data under the economy section helped us to understand jobs, income, and poverty. Housing helps us know the type of housing that is built in our communities, as different communities were built at different times. It also helps us understand some metrics of the housing market, for instance, vacancy rate. Land use can help us show how land is being used, both in general categories, but also in some environmental categories like parks and tree canopy. And transportation helps show us how different people can get around via different modes. The ones that are in bold are our LED data that are generally in the economy section. The data itself, as mentioned previously, comes from a variety of sources like the Census Bureau's population estimates, the 5-year ACS data, LEHD data, and then some local sources like the Northern Ohio Data and Information Service, and then sources that we have within our office and within the county, the Urban Tree Canopy Assessment, the County Fiscal Office, and then data and research that we do with our mapping services. So what is the data book look like? Well, this is the cover page. Inside, we have an overview of the data book that goes through some of the things I just talked about. The purpose, kind of why we're doing this, the data, and how, in this case, it was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic or not. So for data that in 2021 was covering years up to 2020, much of the pandemic was not in play at that point. We talked about how we listed data and maps, where we got our data from, sources about its accuracy, and because we've been doing this over time, comparison to previous years, what should or should not be compared to previous data books. Within the demographics section, this is what a typical page in the data book looks like. And we design the data book so that it is consistent, generally, in terms of where it's laid out, or how it's laid out, and where things like numbers, the map, and graphs go. The maps tend to be able to change. This one in particular is showcasing total population, and it's looking at metrics by community. So it's a single metric, and it's shown by community. Other ones are slightly different. When we looked at race and ethnicity, we mapped this by census tract so that we could see not just how communities are laid out, but how within census tracts there are different racial and ethnic categories that are living in different places. And the graph in this case showcases both race and ethnicity categories for all of our communities. Our most recent addition is internet access, which was a new addition in the 2021 data book. And I'll walk through how these pages are laid out so you get a sense of it. Up at the top left is the topic, so the economy section. And in this one in particular, as I mentioned, was about internet access. The overview provides information about the data, including definitions of what we're talking about. And we tried to keep these short so that people could quickly get to the data that they wanted to understand. The regional data showcases the things like the state of Ohio, the Cleveland metro area, Cuyahoga County, the city of Cleveland, and the inner and outer rings. And in this case, census tract maps showcased where this data falls within the county. So we kept these simple as well. The top left map showcases what % of the population has access to fixed broadband internet subscriptions. Darker areas, a greater % of the population has access to that. Lighter areas, less of the population has access to that. On the right, you can see the chart, which showcases a visual comparison of all of the communities, and we've sorted these so that you can know which community has the greatest access to internet and which at the other end is not. And we have the actual data points, what percentage of the city's population has that internet access by the different categories that we're showcasing. So all of the pages generally follow this so that people can understand very quickly and intuitively what they have and where they fall in the context of the county as a whole. So going through some of the actual data points in Cuyahoga County and how we use some of these. So we're going to focus on the economy, as I mentioned. This is total number of jobs. On the left, you can see that zoomed in chart that showcases the total number of jobs in the state of Ohio with 5.3 million, in the Cleveland metro area with 1 million, Cuyahoga County with 753,000, and then in the city of Cleveland, the inner ring and the outer ring. And we showcase what percentage of the city of Cleveland and the inner and outer ring suburbs, what percentage of the county they have in terms of number of jobs. So 38% of jobs in Cuyahoga County are located in the city of Cleveland, 37% are located in the outer ring suburbs. And we mapped that. What we can see on the right is where those jobs are located within the county, where those clusters are. So darker areas, again, are higher total number of jobs, and we can start to see some patterns here. The darker areas in the center, up at the top, along the lakefront, is downtown Cleveland And heading east from there is Euclid Avenue and University Circle, where the world famous Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals is located. The other three darker areas are suburban areas, Independence, Solon, and Beechwood, which have major job centers along highways that run through Cuyahoga County. We also show this at the different municipality levels so that we can see, for instance, just how many jobs are located within the city of Cleveland compared to any other individual community within Cuyahoga County. We also looked at jobs by industry. The data showcased here looks at jobs by industry in a few different categories, which we had to combine in a couple ways to be able to make them understandable. The red area is goods producing jobs. So this is manufacturing and construction. You can see that these jobs are located in different areas. They tend to be located at the edge of our county and in our industrial valley. Whereas in yellow are jobs in professional and business services, which are located in downtown and Independence. In blue are jobs in financial activities, which are also located downtown and in some of our suburban office centers. And in green are jobs in educational and health services, and these tend to be located in University Circle, again, where the Cleveland Clinic and Case Western Reserve University is located. We're also able to see this at the community level. So we can see the different kind of colors corresponding to different job clusters. So circled in blue in the middle is Mayfield Village, which has a big blue bar. That indicates financial activities jobs, which corresponds to the fact that Progressive Insurance is headquartered in Mayfield Village. At the bottom is Shaker Heights, which has a big section of yellow, professional and business services jobs. So they know that they've got a large number of those based on some new office buildings that were recently constructed in that suburban community. And finally, just as some of these examples, is change in number of jobs. So this slide showcases change in number of jobs at the census tract level throughout Cuyahoga County. Blue are areas where there was an increase in jobs, and red were areas where there was a decrease in jobs. What we can see from this and from the chart on the left is the state of Ohio increased by 5.6% in terms of total number of jobs between 2013 and 2018, whereas the city of Cleveland only increased by 3.4%, and our inner ring suburbs held almost completely flat. You can see that in some of the data that is mapped, where in the top and the middle, we see downtown Cleveland and University Circle, where we see blues, areas where jobs increased. Whereas in the area to the left, we see a number of areas that are pink or red, indicating job losses in some of our inner ring suburbs. We also showcase this by individual community. So we can see in the change in numeric change in number of jobs by community. Cuyahoga County has, as I mentioned, 59 communities. Cleveland added the most, more than 9,000 jobs and a 3.4% increase. At the other end of the spectrum, Brooklyn lost more than 2,600 jobs during that time period due to a major corporate headquarters relocating. So obviously, data is really interesting, but how do we actually use it? How do we use it, and how do we hope our communities use it? Well, we mentioned using it for grant programs, and that we hope that communities use this data so that they can understand their community better. But we also use this internally, and as we're helping communities undertake planning efforts. These two maps are a good showcase of how we tend to use some of this data. One of the benefits of the data book is that everything is included in one PDF. So you're able to compare different data sets across municipalities and across geographies. So on the left is total number of jobs. Darker areas have more jobs. And at the right is access to public transit. Those red dots are bus or train stations. We calculated internally a quarter-mile buffer or walk shed around all of those bus stops, and then determine what percent of a community's land area is located within that quarter mile. So when we overlay these two next to each other, we can see some really interesting things. Areas like downtown Cleveland and University Circle have great access to public transit, but places like Independence and Solon do not have great access to public transit, even though they are a job hub. That helps us when we think about undertaking initiatives. We recently are beginning a transit-oriented development initiative where we think about bringing more development to existing transit lines to provide greater access to folks who are using transit to get to and from work. Another way that we use this was using the tree canopy coverage data on the left with race and ethnicity maps on the right. So on the left, you can see darker areas or areas that have a higher number of trees, and lighter areas have a lower percentage of tree canopy coverage. On the right, you can see our different race and ethnicity maps. And the two lower ones showcase areas where there's a higher percent Black population and a higher percent Hispanic population. Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, like communities across the country, has a history of redlining, and we have deeply segregated communities. So those areas of great concentration can be seen from these maps. Interestingly, and one thing that we learned from this data was that we could see that areas of higher Black and Hispanic population also tended to have lower tree canopy coverage. As part of a county initiative to provide funding to plant new trees, there is a new Healthy Urban Tree Canopy Grant Program. And data like this allows us to consider how we can target tree canopy grants to areas in need and areas in which racial disparities are present. And finally, using the data book, we looked at 3 different metrics that gave us a really interesting insight into our inner ring suburbs. We looked at change in jobs on the left, population change, and household change. In green, are the city of Cleveland, inner ring suburbs, and outer ring suburbs. The city of Cleveland saw a 3.4% increase in total number of jobs during that time period, but a 2.5% decrease in population and a 2.3% increase in households. So jobs are going up, population is going down, but households are increasing, meaning that households are getting smaller. The inner ring suburbs had almost no change in total number of jobs, a greater decrease in population, 2.8%, and a decrease in households of 0.1%. So while the city of Cleveland tends to get the most press because it's the largest community in Cuyahoga County, and we know that population loss can be difficult for a community, this data was able to show us that there are actually even more startling trends that are happening in the inner ring suburbs with both population loss and household loss, as well as stagnant job markets. This allows us to think about initiatives like zoning reform, transit-oriented development, initiatives that can help us address some of these issues to attract more development, more people to the inner ring suburbs. So that's an introduction to the data book, some of the data, and how we've been using it. But we also wanted to share a little bit about how we built the data book. One of the things that we were very much so focused on was creating a data book that was easily replicable internally, as well as making it faster to produce so that we could get data out to communities more readily. And one of the ways that we did that was all of our data in terms of our charts is completely contained within Excel. And that makes it a little bit easier for us to work on the project. These 2 Excel sheets showcase how we set it up. So this one showcases our main data sheet. This is where all the data for the data book lives in one sheet. Up at the top, you can see we've got the individual sections. So that pink bar shows EG, or economic growth, economy section. Underneath that, we have the name of individual tabs, and those tabs correspond to the different metrics. So total employment is EG1. Column number helps us with some internal Excel stuff so that we can run VLOOKUP tables. We also showcase the source of the data. In the case of census data, we also showcase the table that it came from, the year that it came from, and an update date that lets us know when we most recently updated it. Beneath that black bar, kind of in the middle, is the common name so that we can understand the data that we're looking at. Things like total employment, goods producing employment, etc. On the left, we include the name of all the communities in Cuyahoga County, and in the right are all of the fields that we input. And they're color-coded. All of the pink fields are places where we input data each year. All of the gray fields are ones that are automatically calculated. So what's helpful from this is we know exactly what we need to do. We can delete all of the pink data every year, re-input with new data, and everything else is automatically calculated from there. From this main data sheet, we have individual tabs, which is what this is. So each one of these corresponds to one of the charts that is produced for the data book. So this tab is EG1. This is total number of jobs. The red columns are our VLOOKUP table. So we grab data from the data sheet, put it into here in alphabetical order, and then we rank it from 1 to 59. And that community ranking is on the far left. The two green columns then reorder them in a correct order from largest to smallest, and that automatically generates a chart. So every year when we put the new data in, the charts are immediately completed. For our purposes, we tend to put this data directly into InDesign. Other communities could potentially use Microsoft Word or some other format. But that's how we go about building our data book and building the charts for it. This is our second annual data book. It was released in March 2021. Our third edition is expected in the coming months, and we're excited to see the 2022 data book come out. We do take the opportunity every year to update the data, to consider new data sources, and to consider new data points that would be able to be used to supplement existing ones or to replace existing ones if they have not been updated. In addition to the actual PDF, we have an interactive online version of the data book. It's available on our website. It's the same data sets, but it's interactive visualization. So folks that are interested can click around and gather the actual data points and be able to understand their community a little bit better. The book itself is available for download at countyplanning.us/databook as a PDF. We also have the Excel sheet if folks are interested. We have a whole team here that helps put this together, and we have some outside partners that we work with as well. Special thanks to them and all of the staff that put this together. We try to make it as easy as possible, but it still takes some time to gather all of that data, make sure that it's correct, and get that out to folks. As I end, I will leave you with this fantastic picture of the Cleveland Trust Rotunda, one of the former bank buildings in downtown Cleveland, which has been renovated into a grocery store. So if you ever want the most beautiful grocery shopping experience in the world, welcome to Cleveland. But the reason I showcase this is because when this grocery store was attempting to locate where they were going to go in Cleveland, they needed data, right? And when new developments come to communities, they need to know how many people live nearby, what's the income of folks, how many jobs are located nearby, what's the access to public transit. And being able to provide that data quickly and easily to communities so that they can then provide that to interested developers so that we can see new people and jobs coming to a community. That's what we really hope out of the data book. And so that's one of the key reasons why we've put it together. My name is Patrick Hewitt with the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me today and learn more about the County Planning Commission's data book. Thank you to Erlene, Tanja, and Greg, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Patrick, so much for joining us today and sharing the wonderful information about the county data book. Before we get to the chat, we received a few questions regarding the presentation, which will be accessible on the Census Academy website in a week or two at census.gov/academy under the webinar tab. Also, an evaluation will be mailed to you following this webinar. We would appreciate it if you would take the time to complete this short survey so that we may better serve you in the future. So right now, we'll turn to our Q&A. There are a few questions in the chat that I'll read out for Patrick to respond, okay? So the first question, it's actually a statement and then a question. In our major metro region, there is a very low unemployment statistic. However, this is misleading because there is a sweet spot for employment, which is 18 to 34-year-olds. For most people outside of the sweet spot, it is much more difficult to find work. Can we break up the unemployment data by age groups?
So what we included in the data book, sorry, I'm flipping through and trying to find the right data book. What we included was labor force participation as the data point. I think you could also look at labor force participation by age, and that might be another way to include a data point that would give some insights into your community based on the age of folks. And maybe that would address the sweet spot question you're asking about.
Thank you. Next question. What software was used for the maps and tables?
Sure. So Excel was what we used for all of the charts and the tables. The mapping software that we used was ArcGIS. One thing I did not mention was the tabs that we have in our Excel sheet are we just have one Excel sheet that includes all of this, is the overall sheet that informs the charts. Then we also have a secondary sheet, which is an incredibly clean version that we're able to export and import into ArcGIS. And all of our maps are done in ArcGIS and exported. From there, we put it all into a document system called InDesign. And so all of our charts, all of our maps are ultimately copied and pasted into InDesign to be able to build the document itself.
The next question is also a bridge question. Your information is displayed very nicely. Did your organization hire someone to do that, or did you have a staff member do them?
No, we do that internally. Our office is really focused on communication design, so we do all of our design internally. One thing that we really wanted to make sure that we were doing was creating a document that was easy to understand and it was graphically, appealing, so that people would actually want to be able to use it. So we took a lot of time to make sure that things didn't look like they were automatically generated Excel charts, even though they are. Sometimes those little changes can help just make things a little bit crisper, but we did all of that in-house.
Okay. Next question. Will you provide a guidebook to create the data book for our own county?
So we don't have a guidebook, but we do provide the Excel sheet for download, not the entire kind of VLOOKUP system, but the main Excel sheet is available for download from our website so that people can at least understand kind of how we're organizing it. If folks are interested and they want to reach out, if they've got questions, my email is at the end. You can reach out to me and I'm happy to talk through how we set it up and provide more of the functional version of the Excel sheet.
Okay, next question. Did you build the interactive online version in-house or work with a consultant?
Yeah, we have a really smart GIS team here. So we also did that in-house. It's through a program called Tableau. So we have all of these kind of skills based on our master planning experience for communities, and we were able to utilize those to build both the PDF and the online version. We are probably going to be updating the Tableau version, the online version this year, and use a different software. There are a couple free software programs out there that you can use. If I can't remember them off the top of my head because that's some different and very skilled folks than me, but if you reach out, I'm happy to share those with you. We also rely on the county and the consultant to build our website. So while we made all the tables, they were the ones that actually uploaded it to the website.
Okay, comment. Thank you for this, an excellent product, your data book. Next question. What is the cost to develop a data book?
Yeah, so we do all of this internally, so it's not something that we have paid for. What I can say is that year one was less efficient than year two, which was less efficient, we hope, than year three. So definitely the first year took a while in a couple different ways. More so than even the graphics, we're deciding which data points we wanted to use and making sure that we trusted the data sources. So we took a long time to think about what we wanted to include. And that was probably the most time-consuming part of our first year. We also wanted to make sure that we were not just using national data sources, but that we were also using local data sources. The local data sources, like our County Fiscal Office, some of the land use data that we have here in our office, the tree canopy data, stuff that we've done, we just thought helped supplement some of the national characteristics. So as we thought about the huge universe of data out there, that was probably the most time-consuming part of the data book originally.
How do you collect feedback from users to the data book?
Yeah, that's a great question. Every year we have shared the data book through a variety of functions. So we'll use our social media. We will also send out an email to we have an email list at our office to all of the mayors and planning directors, economic development directors within the county. We include in the data book an email address so folks can reach out to us. And one of the things that, we bring to the table is that we're a local organization that's doing this. So we tend to know the communities that we work with, and we're able to have those open dialogues with them. So we typically share it. We ask people to provide feedback. We'll also share it through the media when we do produce this each year. So if folks want to reach out to us, they're able to. But because we're a local resource, we're kind of always here, and we have those open dialogues as well to be able to get that feedback.
Okay, next question. Can you describe the process for developing the table Access to Transit?
Yeah, that one, so there's a couple maps in there and a couple data points in there that are more complicated and time consuming than other ones. Access to transit is one of them. So we grab the bus stop and train station data from the general transit feed service and put that into GIS, into our mapping service. We then do a quarter-mile buffer around that bus stop and compare how much land area within every community is covered by that walkshed, covered by that quarter-mile buffer, so that we can say 50% of the city of Cleveland is within a quarter mile of a bus stop, and the other 50% is not. I'm making that number up. I could pull it up if I wanted to, but that's how we're able to do it. So it's a general understanding of transit access. Obviously, a quarter-mile buffer is just a circle around a bus stop. There might be something that comes in the way, right? Like if a bus line runs along a river, you might not be able to swim across that river to have direct access to the other side. But it gives us an understanding generally of transit access throughout the region.
Okay, one question is how much does it cost to develop a data book?
How much does it cost? Again, we do that internally, so we don't. We didn't calculate a cost of our staff time. We did this in kind.
Okay. Next one says, thank you, Patrick. Have you considered conducting analysis using the LEHD loads data to create commuter sheds, or to inform how residential and employment landscapes interact with within the region?
So actually, that's a really, really good question. And one of the projects that we're working on right now is a plan or a current conditions assessment for our airport region, which is called the Aerozone here. The Aerozone Alliance is a consortium of communities, businesses, and institutions in and around our airport, which is also home to one of 10 NASA facilities, NASA Glenn Research Facility. We have been using drive times from the airport and starting to gather total number of jobs from in that area to help us understand just how many and what types of jobs are located in that Aerozone region and in the drive times around the Aerozone.
Okay, next question. How long does it take to produce a new edition of the data book, and how many people hours work on it?
Yeah, I'm going to say the first year that we did this, it took us about 6 months, which was time consuming, again, to gather all of the data points, to make sure that we liked the data points that we were using, and to figure out how we were going to communicate the data effectively. The second time took about 3 months. Our goal is to get a data book out 2 months after the 5-year ACS data comes out. We've had some changeover in staffing recently that I don't think we're quite going to reach that this year, but our goal is for it to be about 2 months from when the data comes out to when it's completed. And there's a team of about 5 of us that work on it. A data team, a mapping team, and a team that focuses on the layout and writing.
Okay. Another question is how can I get a copy of the data book? I know there's a link that was presented in the chat. Are there any other ways, Patrick?
So we don't Yeah, we don't offer a physical copy of the data book. The best way to grab it is to go to our website, countyplanning.us/databook.
Thank you. How much staff is dedicated to the development and updating of the data book?
Yeah, so it's about 5 people, and that fluctuates a little bit. We also host interns from either the University of Cincinnati or Cleveland State University. So sometimes we'll have slightly more people, but typically around 5 or 6 folks work on the data book each year.
Thank you. From Anna, Patrick, beautiful document. Amazing, good job to you and your team. I'll be reaching out to you.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that.
Okay. Let's see. Will your planning proposal for parks and recreation areas be revised by political community influence despite your excellent data-driven results?
That's a loaded question. So the data book very specifically does not make recommendations. It is data, right? So the data is meant to inform political decision making. Now, our office, what we do is create plans, and that includes significant public outreach. We recently completed a plan. We have a draft plan for an East Cleveland Parks plan, which outlines potential investment areas in parks. So the data was really useful in understanding where those investments might go, but it's also really important to get the input of residents, of business leaders, of folks in government to understand kind of what's possible, where people would like things to be updated or changed, and what they would like to see. So the data is the first step, but it's the beginning of a process to create, for instance, a park plan.
Okay, from Jim, a great presentation. Next question. Can you do a functional assessment, say looking at the public schools throughout all communities?
I'm not totally sure what the question is asking. We did not include much school data in this particular document. What we did include was educational attainment. Unlike a lot of places, I want to say like Maryland has county-wide school systems, we do not. We have school districts that don't even actually follow all the time the boundaries of the community. So there's a Cleveland Heights University Heights School District that covers 2 communities. Other communities are split amongst various school districts. So we did not look at schools or school districts because it tends to also be a different geography. So that wasn't necessarily part of our data analysis.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation. My wife is a volunteer on our town's planning commission. There's a loud group of residents adamantly against any growth. Do you have any suggestions on some key Census Bureau data points that might be used to help her make the case for smart growth? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We are focused right now on a conversation about development along transit lines. One of the things that we've done is started to gather data on, it's not quite building permit data, but it's added value data, which is collected by our County Fiscal Office. But what it helps us do is it helps us understand where development is happening and where that's happening over time. So we're able to compare new development to transit lines to be able to understand if new development is happening along those transit lines or not. What that can help is showcase how many jobs are accessible to folks or not. And I think that's a really strong data point to be able to showcase how we're making it more difficult in some cases to get to a job if you don't have access to a vehicle, for instance. I do think access to a vehicle is another really important one because while commute data, for instance, shows maybe more than 90% of people drive to get to a job, maybe only 70% of people actually have access to a vehicle. And I think that's really important data when we're thinking about smart growth, when we're thinking about new investments in housing or jobs or mixed use development.
Thank you. Next question. What labor market data don't you have that you would like to have or to ask LEHD, Census or BLS, I can't speak, sorry, to develop and publish?
One of the things that we have discussed that we've struggled a little bit with is for educational attainment, data on not just a bachelor's or associate's degree, but on certificates or other kind of non-2-year college degrees, workforce training programs, that sort of thing. Understanding how many folks have undertaken those, that would be really helpful.
Okay. What are some data sources that you choose not to include in the data book and why?
That's a really great question. Well, there was one actually this year that we were considering removing, and I believe it was year moved in. So we had kind of whether or not people moved in prior to 2000, from 2000 to 2009, from 2010 to 2016 or 2017 or later. It's interesting when you map some of these things. Some of them, like the race and ethnicity data, clearly shows up on a map. Other data points don't necessarily have a clear geographic way that they fall, right? The data doesn't clearly show that there's a trend. That one in particular didn't necessarily show a trend that wasn't otherwise picked up. So the one thing that we saw with year moved in was that there were some folks who, some communities that had many more people that had moved in more recently, and that really strongly correlated to the number of renters in that community. And so that was one that we've considered removing, though I don't think we've made that decision yet for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and tap in, give Tanja a little break. So following up, what technologies aside from Tableau and GIS did you all use to create this question mark? R, Python, do you know what packages / APIs?
That I don't. Again, we made the charts in Excel. The maps were done in GIS. We tried to keep them fairly simple. I mean, it's census tracts attached to census level data for the most part.
Okay, next question. Do you do any analyses around the delivery of financial services, say small business lending by banks, by local communities?
That is not something that we have done, no.
Okay, next question. What is Patrick's email to request Excel sheet per download?
Sure, so you can email me at phewitt, PHEWITT at cuyahogacounty.us. Cuyahoga County is spelled Cuyahooga. I spelled Cuyahoga wrong. That's pretty embarrassing.
Okay, another question is, we definitely have a fan for loads data, so thank you so much. Thanks again. I highly recommend the loads data for analyses similar to the airport example you provided. Next one is, can you put the link to the data book in the chat or your website? I did not get it to write it down. Are you able to do that, Patrick, or one of us can do it?
Sure can. It's pretty simple, countyplanning.us/databook.
All right. We'll definitely put that into the chat as well. Can you describe how to develop the tree canopy data set?
Yeah, the tree canopy data set is one that we actually did go out and work, I believe, with a university to develop. They used high resolution aerials to divide up to get land cover data, and were able to parse out tree canopy coverage for the entire county. So that is a specialized data set that we did do internally, and that was something that was paid for by the county. They've done it a couple times so that we can understand change in tree canopy also.
Do you have any thoughts on including forecasted population or economic data in the data book?
We don't include that in the data book itself. We have included it in community master plans, but because of the variability of some of the sizes of our communities, a lot of those tend to really become skewed. So when we have really small communities like Lindale, we can see really huge percent increases, for instance, and so we haven't included population forecasting.
And then I think this one is a question. Demographic data for public schools?
Yeah, that's not something that we have used.
Okay. How is the book used to address homeless problems?
So we don't specifically include homelessness as one of the data points that we have in here. What we do have in here are some housing market metrics around vacancy and around types of housing units, and that helps us think about new housing initiatives that may be able to create more diverse types of housing that are more affordable, as well as trying to understand where there are areas where there's unoccupied housing units maybe that we want to focus on reinvestment. We also do have poverty level data, and I think that's a good it's a good start, but we don't necessarily have homelessness numbers or number of low-income housing units, for instance. We don't have that in the data book.
Besides tree canopy, what other climate-related data sets do you include in the data book?
So we have a few in the land use section that are relevant to climate change. How land is used, so residential, commercial, and industrial, helps us understand where we're seeing suburban sprawl, for instance. We have the transit data, and we have kind of how people are commuting. Obviously, using transit is a more environmentally friendly way of getting to and from, wherever you're going, your job or whatever other way that you're trying to get around in life. So we do start to understand land use as it compares to transit data. The tree canopy is another really good one. We are seeing decreases in the tree canopy. It's one of the reasons why the county has invested money in building up the tree canopy, is because we're seeing some tree canopy losses. Obviously, trees are able to soak up water. They lower heat island effects. So that's another key one that we have in there. We also have access to parks. So how many acres of park land there are by community. And that's a good one to understand green space as well. The data book isn't everything. It can't answer every single question. And that's one of the reasons why it took so long to figure out what data points we're going to go in there. For us in particular, for our office, right, we have other projects that we're also working on, like a climate change action plan that we did in collaboration with our Department of Sustainability and the county as a whole. So some of those questions are answered in other documents as well.
Okay, next question is, what are the best metrics to use for comparison when preparing for a needs assessment?
I'm assuming you're talking about a housing needs assessment. We haven't done a housing needs assessment internally for about 5 years, I'm going to say, actually. So I'm not sure that I'm going to be the best person to answer that particular question. One of the things that that our office did not do, but that we've relied heavily on, is an exterior maintenance review, which was completed for a number of our inner ring suburbs, which has been incredibly helpful in understanding where there are areas where homes are not being maintained very well, and how we might be able to assist homeowners or owners generally in maintaining their homes.
Okay, how do you determine what data is important to include?
Yeah, that group of 5 of us definitely have had some debates on what's helpful to include or not. One of the things that we've talked about is what are the different geographies. Do we want to look at a regional level? Do we want to look at a county level? Do we want to look at a community by community level? One of the things that we do is we look at what we typically gather and what we typically use for a master plan. So if we know that there's a particular data set that is always helpful, maybe it's commercial vacancy rates, maybe it's total population. If we're using that repeatedly, then we're going to include it in the data book. Other ones, it's a trial and error. The year moved in is a good example of one that we originally were thought would be very helpful and maybe ultimately wasn't. So we think of this as a living document, and as we hear from communities who say, I love this, but I'd really like to know more, for instance, about health data. That's one that's come up a few times when we think about communities that are applying for grants. They would love to see health data, and that's not something that we have in there at this time. That's one that I think is a consideration in the future also.
Under race and ethnicity, where can we find out more numbers beyond the 5 given? White, Black, Asian, Hispanic, and other.
Yeah, so the ACS data, the American Community Survey 5-year data, is the data that we used for that particular section of the document. It does include a greater breakdown than just what we showed. We wanted to be able to map some of the things, so we had to make some choices about how we combine data, but it does have a greater number of categories than just what we're showing. And if you look on that page in the data book, we do include the actual source table that we grabbed the data from. So you can grab that source table number in the data book, and you can plug that in so you can find that data for your community.
Is there any data sets that municipalities tend to ask for more than the rest? What's most important to them?
I think what we're showcasing is what we try that we've heard about most frequently are those 5 categories. But I mentioned health data as being one area that we've heard folks requesting data on that we've not included at this point. Trying to think of some other ones that have really come up. Some additional housing data has also been of interest to folks. Some additional and very specific housing market data has been of interest to folks, and we don't necessarily have that in there right now. Certain local numbers around housing value, number of sales, number of foreclosures have all been of interest to folks that are not currently included in there.
Our institution is not part of the city government, but we are interested in producing a local data book. Would the data elements you include likely be useful to most other communities? Can you suggest how to determine what data is most useful locally?
Sure. I think that the data that we used would be a great start. Certainly, it's generally available at the national level. So we talked about the 5 different categories that we looked at. Demographics, housing, and economy are the first 3. And those 3 in particular tend to use national data sets, which means that if you want a good start, I'll certainly say that we think it's pretty good. I'd encourage you to look at those 3 as maybe a good place to start because they are national data sets. The land use data is far more localized. Some of the transportation data is also available at national data sets that you could use as well.
If you had access to any and all data, what element would you love to add to the data book?
Yeah, it would have to be that health data. I do think, somebody brought up climate change and sustainability. I think that would be really interesting, but the health data, which kind of goes hand in hand, would be something that would really be of interest to add to the data book in the future.
And there's 2 more questions that I'm going to read to you, and then we're going to close out our webinar. But does your metro area utilize commercial building vacancy tax strategies to encourage getting these properties back on tax rolls and improving the local communities?
So we employ a number of tax strategies to try and get properties back in use. I don't know commercial building vacancy. Do we tax vacant commercial buildings? Not that I can think of off the top of my head. We are what might be described as a weaker market because of some of our population loss. So we tend to use community reinvestment areas that encourage redevelopments in existing buildings and communities.
Okay, and the final question is, do you include data tables focusing on economic development?
So we do include what we might call economy tables. So total jobs, jobs by industry, job change. We use median household income. Sorry, I'm flipping through them. Educational attainment, self-employment, labor force data, poverty data, and internet access. We don't necessarily include local kind of how much investment has happened locally, or how many how many buildings have been built or constructed, anything like that. We don't include that level of data. We include some of those more general ones that I just described.
All right, and before I hand it back to Tanja, back to you, I just wanted to thank everybody. What great questions. It just kind of tells me that everyone was paying attention. So I like that everyone really enjoyed the presentation. So now I'll send it back to Tanja. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Arlene, and thank you, Patrick. I echo Arlene's her sentiments as well. This has been an excellent webinar, and the questions have just been rolling in. So this concludes the Q&A portion of the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to Patrick for his informative presentation. Can't talk today. I don't know why. Patrick, would you like to share any final thoughts prior to our closing?
Just thank you so much for everybody paying attention and for the great questions. That was really interesting. If you do want to download the data book, countyplanning.us/databook. We also have other projects that you could see. I hope you learned a lot about our data book, about our communities. I hope you come visit Cleveland, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
I want to remind everyone an evaluation will be mailed to you following this webinar. We would like it and appreciate it if you took the time to fill out the short survey so we may better serve you in the future. Please join us next month, Wednesday, July 20th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, when Chip Walker presents Census Data Tools for Equity and Identifying Underserved Communities. Until next time, thank you again for spending your afternoon with us, and enjoy the rest of your day. This concludes our webinar.